I wasn't invited to my own sister's wedding, even after paying for it. She said I didn't fit the vibe, but the smile vanished from her face when the venue canceled everything at the last minute, and she realized the truth. I still remember the exact moment I found out. It wasn't through a heartfelt conversation, a mistake in the mail, or even a passing mention. No, I discovered I wasn't invited to my own sister's wedding in the same way someone learns they were never meant to be part of a secret, the way you find out about a party you were never supposed to know about, through a social media post. Picture it, a beautifully designed invitation card, embossed with gold lettering, delicately resting atop a white satin fabric. The caption read, "The countdown begins, can't wait to celebrate with all my loved ones on the most special day of my life." All her loved ones, but not me. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe my invitation was still in the mail, or perhaps she just hadn't had the chance to tell me in person. After all, I had spent the last 6 months bending over backward to make sure she had the wedding of her dreams. I paid for the venue deposit when she and her fiancé were short on cash. I covered the catering advance when my parents hesitated. I even gave her money for a dress that, ironically, she hadn't even shown me yet. I scrolled through the comments under the post, my stomach twisting. Friends, relatives, colleagues, everyone was gushing about how excited they were to be part of the big day. Someone even joked about how exclusive the guest list must be. Exclusive? That's when the sick feeling started to creep in. I sent her a message, nothing dramatic, just a simple, "Hey, I saw the post. I never got my invite. Did it get lost?" I stared at my phone, waiting for the 3 little dots to appear. They didn't. An hour passed. Then 2. By the time the sun set, I had convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she just forgot to reply. And then, at 10:34 p.m., I got the reply. My phone buzzed again. "Lindsay, hey, I was going to talk to you about this. I hope you understand, but we had to make some tough choices. With the guest list. It's a very curated event, you know? We had to keep it elegant. No offense, but you don't really fit the vibe. I know you'll be happy for me from afar though. Love you." I read the message 3 times before it truly sank in. Curated event? Don't fit the vibe? Happy from afar? The words echoed in my mind like a slap to the face. I wasn't just forgotten, I was intentionally erased. And I knew exactly why. I wasn't like my sister's friends, with their manicured nails, expensive suits, and hollow laughs that filled the high-end cocktail parties where they flaunted their fake perfection. I didn't work in an office with a shiny title, sipping overpriced lattes and discussing investments over brunch. I ran an auto repair shop, a successful one, mind you, the kind that earned more than most of them, especially because I specialized in luxury vehicles. But that didn't matter to my family. To them, I wasn't a businessman. I was just a grease-stained mechanic, a man who always smelled like gasoline, whose hands were permanently rough from years of honest work. Lindsay had always looked down on me for that. She thought real success meant sitting in an air-conditioned office, wearing a suit, running a respectable business, not getting your hands dirty working with cars, no matter how much money you made. She never said it outright, but I could see it in her eyes. Every time I showed up to family dinners in my work clothes, the slight wrinkle of her nose, the quick way she introduced me to her friends, as though I were some embarrassing afterthought. "Oh, my brother just runs some car shop," she'd say with a dismissive wave, as though I were nothing more than a nuisance in a grease-stained uniform. And now, after everything I had done for her, everything I sacrificed, she had curated me out of her perfect little wedding. The wedding I had paid for. The wedding I helped create, only to be shut out of. And in that moment, I realized that all my years of sacrifice meant nothing. To her, I was nothing more than an embarrassing relic from a world she refused to acknowledge. I wasn't part of her elegant world, and I never would be. To her, I was just the guy who fixed cars, not someone worthy of standing by her side. On the most important day of her life. I had financed the wedding, and somehow, I wasn't good enough to attend it. I should have seen it coming. It wasn't the first time my family had made me feel like an outsider. The signs had been there for years, small jabs at family dinners, dismissive comments about my business, the way my parents beamed with pride when my sister got promoted at her marketing firm but barely acknowledged when I expanded my shop. But no matter how they treated me, I never said no when they needed me. When my sister wanted a lavish wedding but couldn't afford it, I was the one who stepped in. I covered the venue deposit, the catering advance, even part of her wedding dress, and I never asked for anything in return. I told myself it was for family, that I wasn't doing it for recognition. Yet here I was, not even worthy of an invitation. You know how expensive weddings are. She had whined one night over dinner at my parents' house, swirling her wine glass dramatically, "If you want something nice, you have to pay for it." I had replied, half joking, "Easy for you to say." She huffed, "You don't have student loans, you don't have to keep up a professional appearance. You wear the same boots every day." That was my sister in a nutshell. She equated success with appearances. She never cared that I built my business from the ground up, that I worked 60-hour weeks to make sure my employees had stable jobs, that I earned every damn dollar I had. To her, I was just a guy with oil-stained hands and working-class problems. But I still helped when she and her fiancé came up short. I wired the money without hesitation, telling myself it was for family. That I was doing it because I loved her. And now, she had the audacity to make me feel like I was invisible, like my sacrifices didn't matter. After everything I did, after everything I gave, I wasn't even good enough to share in her happiness. I wasn't invited to the wedding I paid for. That realization hit me harder than anything. She had everything, the wedding, the career, the life, but to her, I was just the guy who fixed cars. She couldn't even see me as a brother anymore. In that moment, the bitterness built up inside me like a pressure cooker ready to explode. All the years of being the family's safety net, always saying yes, always sacrificing, had led me to this moment. I had been played for a fool. The night I read her message, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying every moment of the past few months, trying to pinpoint when exactly she decided I wasn't good enough to be seen at her wedding. Was it when I showed up to a family gathering straight from the shop, still in my uniform? Was it when she introduced me to her fancy friends, with a quick, dismissive, "This is my brother. He works with cars," like I was some random guy changing tires on the street? Or had she always thought of me this way? The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't announce myself, I wanted to hear what they'd say when they weren't expecting me. As soon as I stepped inside, I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen. "Well, you know how he is," she said, her tone laced with the same quiet disappointment I had grown used to. "I just don't want him embarrassing me," my sister replied. "It's going to be a sophisticated event. I can't have him showing up looking like he just crawled out from under a car." I clenched my jaw, my fists tightening at my sides. "He's family," my dad mumbled, but his voice lacked conviction. "Exactly," my sister snapped. "And he should understand that this isn't about him. I don't need him there making people uncomfortable. He doesn't belong in that kind of setting." I had heard enough. I pushed the door open, stepping into the kitchen. My sister went pale when she saw me, her face draining of all color. My mother quickly busying herself with stirring something that didn't need stirring, avoiding my gaze. "So, that's how you see me?" I asked, my voice calm, too calm for the storm brewing inside me. My sister hesitated before straightening her shoulders, trying to put up a brave front. "Don't take it personally," she said, but the words felt as hollow as the smile she struggled to maintain. "It's just not your kind of crowd." "My kind of crowd?" I echoed, crossing my arms, leaning in a little closer. "Come on, you know exactly what I mean." She huffed, looking away, trying to maintain control. "Everyone there is from the corporate world, lawyers, executives, people who actually network. You don't have anything in common with them. Right? Because I don't sit in an office pushing paper all day, I must be too dumb to hold a conversation." The weight of her words hit me like a slap, but I didn't let it show. "I never said that," she replied quickly, but her face gave her away. The truth was dripping from her every word. My mother sighed, putting down the spoon, her voice softer but still tinged with the same disappointment. "Sweetheart, it's just a different kind of event. You have to admit, you do come off a little rough." Rough? A word that cut deeper than any insult. Rough. I wasn't a suit-wearing, high-flying, corporate robot like the people she admired so much. I wasn't refined enough for her world, despite the fact that I'd worked my ass off to make something of myself. "Sometimes you're always in those work clothes, and you don't carry yourself the way her guests do," Lindsay's voice rang out, each word wrapped in judgment. I steadied myself, unwilling to show how deeply it stung. I own a business, I said, keeping my tone even, though my chest tightened. I make more money than half of the so-called sophisticated people you're inviting. But because I don't wear a suit every day, I'm not worthy, right? Lindsay groaned, the words spilling out with disdain. It's not about money, she huffed. It's about image. Look, I appreciate everything you've done for the wedding, but this is my day. I need it to be perfect. I just don't think you'd fit in. The truth crashed over me, suffocating. All the sacrifices, the help I gave her, it meant nothing. No matter what I had done, to them, I would always be the mechanic, the one who didn't fit their polished world of cocktails, tailored suits, and fake smiles. I took a slow breath and nodded. Got it. My voice was steady, but every word felt like it was burning a hole in my chest. Oh, don't be like that, my mother chimed in, her voice sweet but laced with a quiet command. We can have a nice family dinner after the honeymoon, just us. That'll be more your style. I smiled, but it wasn't kindness that curled my lips. You're right, I said, reaching for my car keys. That would be more my style. Because in my world, when someone helps you, you don't turn around and treat them like garbage. I stormed out before they could say another word. As I drove back to my shop, I could feel the weight of everything that had been building up, the betrayal creeping through my veins. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Lindsay. Sister, don't make this a big deal, okay? You know I love you. Hope you can still help with the final payment for the cake. It's due Friday. XO. I let out a bitter laugh that shook me to the core. I laughed so hard that I had to pull over. She really thought I was still going to pay. That I'd swallow my pride like I always did. She had no idea. This was it. By the time I parked in my shop, I had made my decision. For years, I had been the family's go-to when things got tough, the one who always said yes. But this time was different. I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore. I had been more than just a bank to them. I had been their punching bag. Every time they needed money, I handed it over without hesitation. But now, I was done. I suddenly wasn't good enough, and yet she still had the audacity to text me about paying for her wedding cake like nothing had happened. I had been played for a fool. Not anymore. I texted her back, me? Sorry, I wouldn't want to embarrass you by being associated with your wedding. I'm sure you'll figure it out without me. Good luck. No emojis, no fake kindness, just a clear message. Not even 5 minutes passed before she called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Then my mother. Then my father. By the time I closed up shop that night, I had 12 missed calls. The next morning, I woke up to a series of frantic texts. Sister, what do you mean you're not paying? The cake is already ordered. Sister, you can't just back out. We're counting on you. Mom, sweetheart, don't be spiteful. It's just a misunderstanding, let's talk. Dad, we raised you better than this. I stared at my phone, shaking my head. Not a single one of them apologized. Not one I'm sorry we hurt you. Just expectations, just the assumption that I would keep playing my role. I called my sister. She picked up on the first ring. Oh my God, finally. Listen, I don't know what's gotten into you, but you're acting crazy. You already agreed to pay. So I changed my mind, I cut in. Silence. What? I changed my mind, I repeated slowly, letting it sink in. I'm not paying another dime. You'll have to figure it out yourself. Are you serious right now? She screeched. You're really going to betray me like this? I laughed. Screw you over? You mean like how you conveniently forgot to invite me because I don't fit the vibe of your wedding? Or how you and Mom were talking about me like I was some embarrassment? That kind of screwing over? She huffed. Oh my God, it's not the same thing. That was about appearances. I didn't mean it in a bad way. But this is actual money, real responsibility, and it's not my problem. I said calmly, you didn't want me at your wedding, fine. But you don't get to take my money while pretending I don't exist. You made it clear I don't belong, so I'm acting accordingly. Oh, don't be so dramatic, she snapped. You're just mad because you didn't get an invite. Grow up. I exhaled through my nose, keeping my temper in check. You know what's funny? I said. You think I'm upset about the invitation. That's not it. It's the fact that you used me, that you treated me like an ATM, and still had the nerve to look down on me. That's what pisses me off. Oh please, please, she scoffed. You have plenty of money. You wouldn't even miss it. And there it was. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't even entitlement anymore. It was pure, blatant greed. You're right, I said, my voice colder now. I have plenty of money, and none of it is going to you ever again. Wait, she started, but I hung up. This time, I was done. I didn't hear from her again for the rest of the week, but my parents, they wouldn't let it go. By Saturday, I was getting guilt-tripped from every angle. Your sister is under so much stress, my mom whined. Can't you just do this one thing? It's already planned. My dad added, what's a couple of thousand to you? Family helps family. My mother kept repeating it, as if those words should mean something. But I had heard enough. So I finally said it, my voice steady but laced with bitter irony, family helps family? Funny. I don't remember any of you helping me when I was starting my business. I don't remember any of you being there when I worked 16-hour days to make sure I could afford everything on my own. Or when I paid for half of her wedding and still got treated like dirt. Silence. You guys can figure this out, I finished, my voice final. I'm out. I hung up and blocked their numbers. Let them squirm. I didn't expect silence, not from my sister, not from my parents, not from anyone in my family who had spent years treating me like their personal ATM. I expected calls, begging, maybe even some thinly veiled threats disguised as you'll regret this or you're being selfish. But for 2 whole days, my phone stayed silent. That's when I knew they weren't ignoring me out of anger. They were scrambling, trying to figure out how to replace the money I had just ripped away from them, desperately trying to undo the damage of assuming I would always be there, no matter how they treated me. And then, on the 3rd day, my mother showed up at my shop. She didn't call first, she just walked in, like she owned the place. Her eyes darted around, scanning the cars being worked on, the employees moving efficiently from task to task. I wiped my hands on a rag and crossed my arms, standing firm in the face of her intrusion. Something wrong? I asked, my voice calm, but my gaze unwavering. We need to talk, she said, her voice tight, as if she were trying to keep her composure. I gestured to the office. By all means. She walked inside, her steps hesitant. She sat down in the chair across from my desk, folding her hands neatly in her lap, though they trembled slightly. She looked out of place, as though she didn't belong here, like she'd rather be anywhere else. I took my time sitting down, letting the silence stretch between us, wanting her to feel the weight of her discomfort. Your sister is in trouble, she finally said, her voice tinged with frustration. I raised an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. Oh, don't act like you don't know. I don't, I said, my voice calm, but I could feel the tension building. But I have a feeling you're about to tell me. She exhaled sharply, her frustration bubbling to the surface, as if she had a right to feel this way. The bakery won't release the wedding cake unless they get the rest of the payment. The venue is threatening to cancel the reception unless she settles the remaining balance, and she still hasn't finished paying the florist. I stayed quiet. The wedding was in 2 weeks, and she didn't have the money. My mother pressed on, her voice laced with desperation, she can't cover all this on her own. That's unfortunate, I said, my words flat, as if I were a mirror reflecting back her helplessness. She blinked at me, as if she couldn't believe I wasn't rushing to fix it. You have the money, she said carefully, like speaking to a child. You could help her, and you wouldn't even feel it. I gave her a slow smile, my lips curling slightly. And yet, here we are. Her nostrils flared as she leaned forward, her patience thinning. Stop being petty. You agreed to pay, and she planned everything around that agreement. You can't just pull out at the last second. I tilted my head, letting her words sink in like a slow poison. You mean like how she planned her guest list without me? Funny how that works. This isn't the same thing, she snapped. Oh, sure it is, I replied, my voice calm but firm. She made a choice. I made mine. She wanted a wedding without me in it. Great. That means she doesn't need my money either. For God's sake, my mother muttered, rubbing her temples, frustration creeping into her voice. I waited. I waited for her to try something new, another attempt to guilt trip me, to remind me that family helps family, to tell me I shouldn't hold grudges, that this wasn't how I was raised. But instead, she let out a slow breath, sat up straighter, and finally said, "If you don't help her, she's going to have to downgrade everything. She'll be humiliated." "People will talk," my mother said, her voice dripping with concern. I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the room. "Now we're getting to the real problem," I replied, her face darkened. "It's not just about appearances," she said stiffly. "She deserves a beautiful wedding. She deserves exactly what she can afford," I corrected her, my tone flat. "And clearly, that's not the wedding she planned." My mother's lips pressed into a thin line, her patience wearing thin. "So that's it? You're just going to sit here and let your sister suffer?" "She's not suffering," I said, my voice cold. "She's getting a reality check. One that's long overdue." My mother stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a huff, she stood up, smoothing her blouse and adjusting the strap of her purse. "You'll regret this," she said simply. I shrugged, unbothered. "Maybe." She left without another word, and I felt nothing but relief. Over the next few days, the cracks in my sister's perfect wedding plan started to show. First, she posted a vague status on Facebook, "It's so hard when people you count on let you down. But I guess that's life, right?" I ignored it. Then I got a call from a mutual cousin. "Dude, what's going on? Your sister's freaking out. She said you bailed on paying for the wedding." "That's correct," I said flatly. "But why?" he asked. "Because she didn't invite me," I said simply. Silence followed. Then, finally, he spoke again. "Oh yeah. Okay, I get that." The next day, my sister texted me. "Can we talk?" I waited an hour before replying. "Talk about what?" "Sister, I don't want things to be like this between us. Can we meet for coffee?" I almost laughed. She didn't want things to be like this? The same sister who had deliberately excluded me from the most important day of her life just because I didn't fit her image? No, she didn't want things to be like this because it was inconvenient for her. But I was curious, so I agreed. When I arrived at the coffee shop, she was already there, tapping her manicured nails against her cup. She gave me a hesitant smile. "Hey," I greeted her, sitting down. She sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes. "Look," she started, but I could already tell where this was going. Before she could continue, I checked my phone, scrolling through my Twitter feed. I froze when I saw her post, "Sister, I can't believe my own family is abandoning me when I need them most. It's so hard when you realize the people you trust will let you down." I looked up at her, my face unreadable. "Really?" I asked, unable to hide the bitterness. "That's your post? Using social media to twist the narrative?" She flinched, but didn't respond right away. I could see the wheels turning in her head, but I wasn't backing down. "I know you're upset," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm not upset," I interrupted, my tone steady but cutting. "I just finally see things clearly." She frowned, the confusion clear on her face. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I get it now," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I'm useful when you need something, but the second I become an inconvenience to your perfect little world, you toss me aside." "That's not fair," she protested, her voice rising in frustration. "Isn't it?" I shot back, my gaze unwavering. "You didn't think I was good enough to be at your wedding, but my money was good enough. You can't have it both ways." Her lips pressed into a thin line as she struggled for words. I just wanted everything to be perfect. And I did think you'd care." "Well, now you know," I said, the finality of my words hanging in the air. She hesitated, her voice softer now. "If I invite you now, will you help?" I smiled, but it wasn't with kindness. I stood up slowly, my words cutting deeper than any sharp object. "Enjoy your wedding, sis," I said, my voice cold. "But you'll have to figure it out without me." I turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind me. The morning of my sister's wedding, I woke up feeling light, no stress, no guilt, no obligations. For the first time in years, I wasn't burdened by their expectations. There was no need to rush around fixing last-minute problems. No one was calling me to cover extra costs or begging me to step in and save the day. I wasn't invited, and for the first time, I realized I had stopped caring. But apparently, my family hadn't stopped caring about my money. At 11:27 a.m., the first call came, "Mom." I let it ring, my finger hovering over the screen, but I didn't answer. At 11:42 a.m., my dad tried, ignored. At 12:03 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from my cousin. "Cousin, bro, you're not going to believe this, the venue just kicked them out." I stared at the screen for a moment, disbelief and amusement flooding me. Then, I laughed. The disaster had arrived, just as I had warned them. I had given them every chance to fix their mess. But no. My sister assumed someone, anyone, would step in at the last second. But no one did. Without the final payment, the venue canceled the event. The staff locked the doors just as the guests were arriving, leaving them standing outside in their expensive suits and cocktail dresses, confused as the wedding planners scrambled to explain. And my sister, she was hysterical. The fancy 5-tier cake? Never delivered. The high-end floral arrangements? Cancelled. The high-profile wedding she had bragged about for months? Gone. At 1:15 p.m., she finally called me. I picked up the phone. "What?" I said, my voice flat. "Are you happy now?" she shrieked, her words sharp like broken glass. I leaned back in my chair, my expression almost amused. "About what?" "You know exactly what," she snapped, fury bubbling under her voice. "The wedding is ruined." "Oh," I said casually. "Didn't have enough money?" "You knew we didn't have enough money," she screamed. "You were supposed to help. You promised." I chuckled. "No, you assumed." Silence hung in the air for a moment, heavy and suffocating. "You let me fail," she said finally, her voice trembling, breaking through the silence. I corrected her, my voice firm. "No. You failed all on your own." For the first time, she broke. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible, like a broken cry for help. "Why couldn't you just help? After everything we've been through, after everything I've done." "Everything you've done?" I repeated, my patience snapping like a fragile thread. "You mean like using me for years? Like taking my money without a second thought? Like treating me like garbage the second I wasn't useful to you?" "I didn't mean it like that," she muttered, but the words didn't reach me. "You never do," I said coldly. "That's the problem." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, like the space between two strangers. Then her voice wavered, breaking with a mixture of confusion and desperation. "So this is it? You're really just going to walk away?" "I already did," I replied. "You just didn't notice until now." And I hung up. The wedding was moved to a relative's backyard at the last second. No extravagant decorations, no 5-star catering, just a haphazard setup, pieced together with whatever they could throw together. I heard that my sister spent the entire night holding back tears, too humiliated to even enjoy her own wedding. I didn't reach out. I didn't apologize. I didn't check in. I let them figure it out on their own, for once. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. Final update: a year later, it took months before my parents finally accepted that I wasn't going to change my mind. At first, they tried guilt, then anger, and finally silence. But now they treat me carefully, like they finally understand that if they push too hard, I won't hesitate to walk away permanently. As for my sister, she never apologized. But she also never asked me for money again. I consider that a win. And me? I'm still running my business, still doing just fine. Only now, every dollar I earn is mine. After everything that happened, I've learned some tough but necessary lessons that have changed how I view myself and my relationships, especially with my family. First lesson: learning to say no. For years, I said yes to everyone, especially my family, always putting their needs first. But I've realized that constantly giving without respect or recognition is harmful. It's not selfish to protect yourself. Saying no can be empowering. It doesn't mean I don't care, it means I care enough to not let myself be taken for granted. Second lesson: setting boundaries. No relationship should come at the expense of your own well-being. For too long, I allowed my family to take advantage of me. But I've learned that it's okay to set limits. When I started protecting myself by saying this is enough, I finally started respecting myself. Third lesson: Don't be afraid to lose something when standing up for yourself. In the past, I feared losing my family if I didn't keep pleasing them. But I've realized that keeping the peace at the cost of my own happiness is no longer worth it. Sometimes, standing up for yourself means letting go of toxic situations, and that's okay. Final lesson: financial independence and self-worth. I let my family control too much of my life through money. Now, I realize that every dollar I earn is mine, and no one has the right to dictate how I use it. My financial independence is my choice, and I've learned to stand firm on that. Ultimately, I've learned to stop living for others and start living for myself. Setting boundaries and saying no are acts of self-respect. How about you? If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you keep giving and sacrificing for others, or would you finally stand up for yourself and set boundaries? It's not always easy, but sometimes, it's the only way to reclaim your peace and self-respect. I'm curious to hear what you think.